Hello friends, it's Kristie Marcotte. For today's video, I'll be using an assortment of black and white paper collections from Paper Rose. This first one is called Monochrome Basics 1.0. Their 6x6 paper pads have 18 double-sided pattern papers. You'll get 3 of each 12 designs. So here's a quick look at this first collection. I'm not going to show the other two, you can just see it from the sample on the front. So I also have Monochrome Basics 1.0 and then they have a black and white plaid. I like that you can use these collections for any card theme. You could make some black and white cards or you can add a pop of color and mix it in with the black and white patterns. For card design number 1, I'm using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 425. Now for this card, I'm using some pattern paper from each of the paper collections. So I have a little bit of plaid and a little bit from both of the monochrome basic collections. I decided for this first card design to keep it all black and white. Now for the other cards, I will be bringing in that pop of color. I'm layering all of these pieces on some black cardstock. Most of my cards in this video are American A2 size, so 4 1/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches. I will have links provided in the description box for all of the products used in this video. Paper Rose is located in Australia. They do ship internationally, but you can also purchase their products here in the US. So I will have links to both locations in the description box below. Before adhering this white polka dot panel, I am adding some scrap pieces of cardstock where it goes off of that black and white polka dot paper. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the card. For the sentiment on the card, I'll be using the word thanks, and I cut this out from some black mirror cardstock. The sentiment is by Paper Rose. It's part of their Hugs, Thanks, Hello Chunky Script die set. I love this die set with all those nice general sentiments, and I use it all the time. I'll also be using some of the sentiment cut-aparts from the So Extra Black 1.0 set. So I have the word many and also for everything. So I'm just putting liquid adhesive and adhering those words above and below the word thanks. For a finishing touch, I'll add 3 small circle die cuts in the upper right hand corner. And I wanted to keep this card fairly flat so I don't have to pay anything extra to mail it. So there is my finished card, and I did make a total of 2 using this sketch. For card design number 2, I'll be using a card sketch from MFT. This is number 544. Now this was designed as a slimline size, so I decided to make a mini slimline. So my card will be 3 1/2 inches by 6 1/2 inches. I'll be using the Monochrome Basics 1.0 collection for this card. So I have that black and white polka dot paper for the background. I'll be adding that thin strip of the wide black and white stripes. First I'll layer this black and white panel on some black cardstock, and then I'll layer it again on some more black cardstock. It'll add just that little extra detail with that thin border. Put my card front onto a card base. It's fun to make a slimline card once in a while. The only thing I don't like is it's always a side fold card base. I really prefer the top fold card base. Now before I adhere that striped paper, I will add some thin strips of cardstock just to the very outside edge where it goes off of the other layers. That'll keep it nice and level. And I do need to add 2 different layers since there's at least 2 layers on the card panel. Now before I adhere that, I will bring in that pop of color. So I used 2 different shades of red and cut out an assortment of circle die cuts. For that larger circle, I did trim down the top portion, and I'll do the same for this smaller circle since it will be covered up by that stripe paper. And then to fill in that gap between the 2 circles, I'll add a scrap piece of cardstock. Then I'll put liquid adhesive on the back of the stripe paper and adhere it to the card. Now I can start adding the rest of those circle die cuts. I did have a little bit hanging off the edge, so I just trimmed that off. So So overall, this card is nice and flat, so another one I won't need to pay anything extra to mail. For the sentiment on the card, I have happy birthday, and I'll layer this on some black cardstock. This is one of the cut aparts from Paper Rose's black and white sentiment sheets. I love those sentiment sheets. There's a huge variety of different sentiments. So I'll adhere that to the right on that striped paper. And then a finishing touch, I'll use some Nuvo Crystal Drops. This is the Morning Dew color. It'll dry clear, adding 1 drop to the outside edge of each of those circles. So there is my finished card, and I was able to make 2 using this sketch. For card design number 3, I'm using a sketch from Mojo Monday. This is number 558. The pattern paper is from the Monochrome Basics 1.0. So I have that checkerboard paper for the top and then the black and white polka dot paper for the bottom. Layering these on some black cardstock. I do have a gap between those 2 pieces, but that's okay. I'll be covering that up with just a thin strip of black cardstock. Put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere that, covering up that gap. Flip over that panel and trim away those extra pieces, and I can put my card front onto a card base. For the pop of color on this card, I decided to bring in some brown pearlescent cardstock. So I'm using it for that smaller rectangle piece featured on the sketch. I'll just adhere that to the left-hand side. For that thin strip, I'm using some more black cardstock. I did already add those scrap pieces of cardstock above and below on the edge of that black strip, just where it goes off of that brown cardstock piece. I cut out a stitched circle die cut. Before adhering it in place, again, I'll add that scrap piece of cardstock just on the right side of the circle. Then I'll add liquid adhesive and adhere it to the card. For the sentiment, I'll be adding the word hi. I cut it out from some black cardstock and also that same brown pearlescent cardstock. And I'll layer the 2 pieces together, so you're just gonna have that peak of the black cardstock from behind. So it'll add a little bit of dimension and some contrast. I'll adhere the eyes together, then put liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the center of that circle die cut. I love using general sentiments, since then you can add any sentiment on the inside of the card. So this would be good for birthday, for Father's Day, pretty much for any occasion. For a finishing touch, I'll bring in some more of the Morning Dew Nuvo Drops, just adding 3 of them to the left of that strip of black cardstock. So there's my finished card. I did make 2. They're just opposite since I used the other side of the pattern paper for that second card. Now moving on to card design number 4. This time I'll be using the plaid paper. I have 2 different plaid papers. The background has a little more white, and then that smaller rectangle piece is more black and gray. That smaller piece I used a stitched rectangle die. And I'll layer both of these pieces on some black cardstock. It'll add that little bit of contrast to separate those 2 busy patterns. I'll adhere the 2 pieces together, putting that smaller rectangle in the center. Then I'll put some ATG tape on the back and adhere my card front to a card base. I had a small sliver of the white card base showing on the bottom of the card, so I did go and trim that off. I have a stitched oval die cut, and I'll adhere it to the left side of this panel. Decided not to have it centered. For my pop of color, I'm using some pink glitter cardstock. I used Paper Rose's Wildflower 1 die. Thought this made a really lovely image on the card. Just adhered it directly onto that circle die cut. For the sentiment, I used Paper Rose's Hello Fine Script Layered die. It has 2 different dies, so it cuts out the word and also the outline. So I've already adhered those 2 together. I will add some scrap pieces of cardstock on the right side where it goes off of that white oval. Need just a couple more little pieces in that bottom corner. Then I'll put some liquid adhesive on the back and adhere it to the card. Just having part of the H on top of that white oval. Then for a finishing touch, I'll add 3 small circle die cuts. This time I cut them out from some glossy mirror cardstock, and I'll just attach the 3 in the upper right-hand corner. They're nice and flat, but they have the look of a large brad, so I think it adds a lovely touch. So there is my finished card, and again, I did make 2 using this card design. I think the light pink looks really nice with all the black and white. For card design number 5, I'm using the Monochrome Basics 1.0 collection again. I love this background pattern paper with all the little flourishes or leaves. I'm adding a thin strip of the black and white polka dot paper, layered it first on some black cardstock and then again on this purplish pink cardstock. So there is my pop of color. Then I'll layer this panel on some black cardstock. Had a little bit of that purple cardstock hanging off the edge, so I just trimmed that off. Then I can add my card front to a card base. And for this card, I will have that 1/8 of an inch of the white card base showing. If my background panel has more white on it, I don't like to have that white card base showing, but there's more of another color, then sometimes I like to add that little bit of white. I cut out a stitch circle die cut from some white cardstock. I'll add some scrap cardstock pieces where it'll go over that strip in the middle, just to keep it nice and level. And for the image on the card, I cut out this beautiful butterfly. This is the Elena butterfly by Paper Rose. I've already added some double-sided tape to the back side since I wanted to keep most of those little cut apart pieces attached. Then I cut out a second butterfly from that purplish pink cardstock, and I'm inlaying just a few of the pieces for a little extra detail. And this is a magenta mirror cardstock, so I thought that was really pretty. I'll remove all of the release paper, and I cut down most of that double-sided tape to some tiny pieces just to make sure it had good coverage. Then I'll add a thin foam square just on the upper portion of the wings, so it'll pop up that wing just a little bit. I'll also add some liquid adhesive to all of the areas that I don't have that double-sided tape. I'll adhere the butterfly to that circle die cut, putting it at an angle. Then for the sentiment, I used another of those cut apart sentiments, this time thinking of you. And for a little extra touch, I cut out 2 stitched banners, and I'm adding them to the upper right-hand corner. I have one with that purplish pink cardstock and the second with the black. And I did add that small scrap piece of cardstock before adhering the black banner. So there is my finished card. I did end up making 2. This is definitely my favorite card from this set, but do let me know which card is your favorite. Moving on to card design number 6, using the Monochrome Basics 1.0, just having some pattern paper for the background. So it has all these tiny little triangles. I used Paper Rose's Slimline strips die set, cut out this stitch strip, added some double-sided tape to the back, and then adhered it to the lower portion of the card. Then I'll add just a thin strip of black cardstock. Just flip over this panel and trim off the extra. Then I'll add this panel onto some black cardstock. So the cardstock layer for this card is an additional 1/4 of an inch. That background piece is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. Put my card front onto a card base, then I can start working on the image for this card. I wanted to feature a vase with some leaves and flowers on this card, but I don't have any vase dies. So instead I used a stitch circle die cut and just trimmed off the top. And I cut this out from some black glossy mirror cardstock. Then I have an assortment of leaves. These are from Paper Rose's Tropical Leaves die set. I put some ATG tape on the back side, and I'm just adhering those leaves behind. I'll add another layer of the ATG just to make sure everything is going to stay in place. Then I'll add some thin foam squares to the back side, leaving a gap where those strips are on the bottom portion of the card. I will add just a thin piece of cardstock, and then some liquid adhesive. Not getting all of the areas of the leaves, but enough that it's going to stay on the card. So I'll press those all down. Missed a couple little areas, so I did add another drop of glue. Then I'll start working on the rest of the leaves. On this one leaf toward the left, I did add a thin foam square just on that very bottom portion. And then I trim down this final little branchy leaf and tucked it behind. I'll also be adding a few flowers. This is the Eve flower die set. So it's smaller one in orange, larger in yellow. For the center, I did use some glitter cardstock, so it has just that little extra sparkle. And then I'll adhere both of those to the right side of the little flower leaf arrangement. For the sentiment, I have another cut apart. This is Just Because. Just adhere it to the upper right-hand corner. And there is my finished card. I did make two using this card design. Those tropical leaves are so much fun, and I think I pulled it off with that round vase. I don't know, what do you think? Now here's just a quick recap of the 12 cards I made using 3 different Paper Rose black and white 6x6 paper collections. I love how versatile these paper collections are. You can keep them black and white, or you can add that pop of color, and they really work for any card occasion. I will have links provided in the description box if you are interested in any of the products I used in this video. Paper Rose is located in Australia. They do ship internationally, but you can also purchase their products here in the US. I will have links for both locations. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.